Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a great show today. We're bringing back on America's favorite naval aviator, Lieutenant Brock Cinder Friedman, and he's going to talk us more about his naval aviation adventures and explorations and things he's learned by navying and everything in between. It's going to be great. However, I can't do this alone, and Rafe loves to talk about flying and smart people things. So, Rafe, how are you doing today?
Zach, as usual, I am stupendously fantastic. It's a great day to be doing podcasting with you, and it's a great day to be with our listeners. Thank you to all our listeners. We are indebted to you for giving us your time and taking the time out of your day to listen to our little rambles here. We would not be what we are without you. So thank you very much. As usual, if you want to contact us, talk to us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all sorts of other places in between. If there's a platform we need to be on, please let us know and we will figure out how to do that. If you are new to the podcast, thank you for coming. Just know that if you give us 4 episodes, we will give you a reason to come back. So keep in mind, if you tell a friend of yours to listen and you get him to listen, we will give you a free episode. And that's a deal you cannot pass up. Zach, I'm sure you are well aware, we are looking for someone to help us, help our little team here. We want somebody to make us sound good and look even better. Some young person who knows a lot about Insta stuff and social media, this and that, and who can run computers and make sound noises in the computer. And like, you know what, if you got skills somewhere roughly approximating that space, let us know and send us a little note and tell us how you can help us out, and we will get back to you. So Zach, Cinder is back in the studio, if I am correct. Is that true?
He is. He is joining us from his home, and he's not on a boat, which is significantly less fun than it would be to record this, as he would be on a boat. But anyways, Cinder, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Any day that you are not on the boat is a fantastic day, and it just so happens to be a beautiful sunny day here in San Diego, and I'm thrilled to be back with you guys. So thanks for having me back.
All right, awesome. If you all remember, last time we had Brock on, he was telling us some stories. One of the stories about how he got the name Cinder, along with the journey he took to get to where he is. However, we were interested in a little bit more about what's next, or things you've learned from the military, from the Navy, and all those things filling in. And Rafe has significantly more thought out questions than I do, so I'm going to hand it over to him for that.
Yeah. So we talked about aviation basics and how you run your missions, and you chase submarines all over the globe. But you're not always running missions out there on boats in the middle of the Pacific. So what do you do when you're not missioning? When you're not out on a boat chasing the submarines? What's life like for a naval aviator there in San Diego?
So on days where I'm not scheduled to fly, I have ground jobs. You know, everyone in the squadron will usually have 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 ground jobs. For me, I'm a division officer, so I'm in charge of 20 enlisted maintainers downstairs, as we refer to it, because generally all the pilots and aircrew will conduct their work upstairs, and then downstairs we'll have all our maintainers so they can have access to the hangar bay where they're conducting their maintenance on the helicopters. So I'm in charge of a shop down there. And it's my job essentially to help them in their careers, right? So they're always going through and being evaluated, and I want to help all of them advance to their next rates and provide them with all the tools they need, to be happy, because I always want happy maintainers working on the aircraft.
Yeah, you want happy guys making sure the aircraft you're flying flies, lest the aircraft doesn't fly, right? That's
yes.
So you have an office, like there's a hangar with aircraft inside. You have like offices above that thing, or in a building next door, or how does?
Yeah, so it's all one building. We do have the hangar with the helicopters in there, and then the maintenance shops are lined up adjacent to the hangar, so they can always pop in and do their work and get back to their space. And then if you go up the stairs, that's where we have a whole other segment of the building. It's not something cool like the movies where we have windows looking down into the hangar or anything like that. It's just a row of more or less generic office type spaces. So we have an admin, we have operations, we have a training room, kind of all the different departments that we would need as a squadron.
So not only are you flying, one of the pilots flying these aircraft, you have a whole nother job there as, for lack of a better term, a leader of 20 maintainers. Leadership was something that Zach and I talk a lot about here, and Zach even has these Zachisms. You've said you've listened to a number of our podcast episodes, and a lot of these things are hitting home for you with what you do there in the Navy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, a huge part of, in my opinion, being a military officer is knowing how to lead, and not only knowing how, but being able to lead in different ways, because you're always going to have different types of people that you need to be able to speak to, and people learn differently, so you have to be able to access different routes to get messages across, to show them why it's important what they're doing, why they need to continue, stuff like that. And they'll ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it's hard to give them the answer. Sometimes you just have to tell them because it needs to get done. But there's a lot of leadership involved, especially once you have to head out to sea and be there for them.
Yeah. So now you are leader guy here at this squadron, but you're going to be moving coming up very soon. You're moving from San Diego to Pensacola, Florida, to the base that's there. What is?
Yep. So if you remember last time, I think we talked about kind of that training syllabus, and when I mentioned advanced, where the student naval aviators will learn how to fly a helicopter and earn their wings, I'm going to be a helicopter instructor at the helicopter training squadron there. So I'll be in that advanced phase of their syllabus. I'll be teaching them how to fly the helicopter.
So you'll be the guy in the plane with them as you kind of walk through, like, this is the thing that makes the science and the magic work in this way. Like you're Merlin and you're teaching the next generations of wizards. Is that what I'm getting at here?
That's exactly it. They'll have some classes beforehand, so they'll do a lot of academics before they actually sit next to me in the helicopter and start flying. But then I'll be the one taking them out and hovering with them for the first time and showing them how to fly a helicopter.
Okay. So I remember when I learned how to drive my car, and you would go through driver school, and there was like the driver instructor dude had like steering wheel and pedals, and like if I did something wrong, he could kind of adjust it and make sure no one died. Do you have the same benefit in the helicopter, or is it kind of just trainer pilot guy is on his own and he's going to listen to you?
We have maybe even a better setup than he does, because we have two sets of identical flight controls on either side, because we sit side by side up in the cockpit. So at any point, I can come on the controls and kind of save us from, a bad situation. You always want to catch it before it becomes a bad situation. But yes, I will definitely be able to jump on the controls and save us from getting in a tough spot.
So anybody who's ever taught anybody knows that it's one thing to know the topic. It's another thing to know how to teach the topic. So did you have to have special training to be a trainer?
So that is kind of still to come for me. So right now I'm leaving my fleet squadron, who I deployed with and everything, and I'm going to go be an instructor. So when I first get there, I'll actually go through a whole syllabus that's completely designed to teach me how to be an instructor at the HTs, the training command. So I'll learn, how to teach the classes. I'll learn how to fly with students. I'll learn the common mistakes they make, so that I can always kind of stay a step ahead of them. Because if you've ever flown, you always want to stay ahead of the aircraft. You never want to find yourself being reactionary. You always want to be making the decisions and kind of driving the flight forward.
Yeah. So, and how long is that going to be? That's got to be a fairly lengthy preps. I mean, the real onus is on you now. I mean, it's one thing to be the pilot. It's another thing to teach the pilots. What's the time frame for that?
I want to say that the HIT-U, that's what we call that training course, is about 3 months.
It's 3 months. And then you will get a crop of students that'll come in, and you'll be like, here's how you make the helicopter do helicopter things.
Here's how you use the magic dust.
Yeah, they'll come in, they'll have a grade sheet assigned to them, so they'll have to go out, and first they'll have to be able to have discussion points that they're able to speak to intelligibly to show that they've studied and put in the preparatory work. And then we'll go out and we'll fly, and they'll have to execute certain maneuvers up to a certain standard. And that's what I'll be doing. And periodically, I'll be assigned on wings, which are like the fresh guys, and I'll teach them kind of their first, I don't know, 4 to 6 flights or so before they start flying with a bunch of different instructors, because they try to build a little bit of familiarity before they just throw you to the lion's den. So that's what I'll be doing.
So you'll have there's kind of there's a lot of different jobs to do there as flight instructor guy.
Yep, you'll fly a lot of different types of flights, and you'll always be flying with different students. Day to day, you're usually flying with a different person.
Now you are. I'll use the term checked out, although that's probably a little bit thin for what you do. But you're checked out in the MH-60. And are there other aircraft that you fly or can fly or?
So right now I do have my private pilot's license, and that would allow me to, as soon as I was checked out, I do a flight with a stand pilot that says I'm good to go. I could go out and I could fly a Cessna. I could, if I found some place that had a T6, I could go and fly that. Or I could fly the 60 variant of the helicopter. I think in the civilian world it's called the S-70, but I don't know of too many places where I can rent a Seahawk. So if you find one, please let me know. Please reach out to Bufnagle, who will get in touch with me and let me know where I can go fly a.
We will get Bufnagle Aviation on that right away. So
perfect.
So now you're moving. You have a family, and they're going with you from San Diego to Florida.
Yes. So my wife Beth, we've been married for 3 years now, and then we have 2 dogs, 2 golden retrievers that'll be coming along with us. So we'll be making that drive out next Friday, spend a few days transiting the country, and then we were able to buy a house down in Pensacola. So we're excited to move in there, have a little bit bigger space than we do here in San Diego, and have our life there for the next 3 years.
Wow. And then, so this job that you're going to and the job that you were in, so there's things about this job that are awesome. And there are things about this job that are not quite as awesome. So is there anything that you would want to change about being Johnny Naval Aviator, man?
Well, the thing I'm excited for with this tour is that we call it a shore tour. So the one I was on most recently, the one I'm still technically in, that's a sea tour, meaning I'm eligible to be deployed, and I went on these deployments. So I did one 7-month one, and that was tough. It's hard to be away from home, from your loved ones, your friends and family for that long, and you're kind of stuck with people on the ship. Luckily, I had a great crew. People on the ship were some stand-up people, and I loved the other pilots and maintainers and air crewmen I was out with. We had a lot of fun together. Then I did 2 subsequent underways. They were both about a month long, and it's just tough. It's tough to have to explain that you're going to be gone for another month, and that you'll be close, basically off the coast of California here, but you can't come home to them every night, can't cook dinner with them. That gets tough.
And you miss your dogs.
Yeah, and I miss my dogs. They are snuggle bugs through and through. They love nothing more than to jump up in bed and curl up with you. So right. It'll be nice to have the next 3 years, no deployments. I'll get to come home every night, and that's really going to be a blessing.
Lots of pizza nights.
Oh yeah,
I hear you. So you went to Notre Dame, and faith is an important part of your composition as a man. So yes. How do you integrate that with you got the Navy, which is one thing, and you go to church, that's a different thing. But those two things get integrated in your real life. So how do you see those two things both working together?
I would say, to kind of borrow a phrase from you guys, seeing the good and finding the good. I definitely find that with the people that I fly with, because it's a very unique situation, particularly when you're out flying, in the middle of the ocean, you're coming in to land on the back of the boat. Everyone in that crew, you have to have just a incredibly deep level of trust and understanding that they're going to do what is needed, that they know their role and they're going to fill that role. To touch on Zach's points, everyone needs to be doing their job, and just it's kind of a clarity, just seeing that goodness in them, knowing that you can lean on them, that you can trust them just inherently. It's a powerful thing, and it's one of my favorite parts about the job.
So the good you see is a brotherhood. It's
absolutely.
It's a trust thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's your long-term plan then? So you owe, as far as I remember from our last episode, you owe 8 years of service after you get your wings,
Yep.
and you are now what, 3 years into that?
So I'm about 4 years into that.
4
Took
years.
me roughly 2 years to get the wing. So I winged in March of 2017. So here I am 4 years later. So still have about 4 years left. And then that's just when my commitment ends. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to kick me out. Doesn't mean they're definitely going to hold on to me. It's just that's when I would have a say. So I'm of the opinion that I'm just going to keep doing the best job I can so that I can have doors open for me when that time arrives. But I'm not making too many plans. One thing that's very common in the military is that things are always subject to change.
If you complete your 8 years in the next 4 years, and you don't go back to doing naval related things, what would you want to pursue?
Whew. I really don't know. I've always felt a calling towards being a teacher. Just something I felt passionate about for a long time. So I think long term, I would like to find myself in a teaching role. I don't know if that would, be the best thing to do 4 years from now. I got to see where I'm at with, raising a family and growing a family with my wife. It's something we'd both like to do. And just unfortunately, the compensation teachers receive, I don't think is quite what it should be. But that's a story for another time. So that might have to wait a little while for me. But long term, definitely would love to teach.
All right, I could see you well in that role, and I think teaching would also open up coaching, which I know you as a coach, I think would be a very good thing for the youth, whoever those youth are. So,
I'm very much looking forward to repeating a line that Rafe told me back in the day where we were running around and I was just so thirsty, and I was like, "Hey, can I go get some water?" And he just told me, "Drink your spit."
That sounds like something I would have said. And you begging for mercy out on the court, wanting to go get a drink. That seems like the kind of thing I tend to remember. So, so back to, I want to go back a little bit to the mission stuff that you do. So you've had these deployments on the boat, and you chase the submarines. But when is that like an everyday thing? Like, you were deployed for 7 months, and I got to imagine some of that time was getting from California over to wherever you were. Is there do you just sail around? Is there like a boat that carries the fuel? You just.
Yeah, so first we'll set the record straight that submarines are not a dime a dozen. You don't go out and just be like, "Hey, look, another submarine." They like to stay hidden. That's really what they excel at. They don't like being seen. So over the course of my 7-month deployment, I think I only saw maybe 3 or 4 submarines, and they were all transiting on the surface. We didn't even find them in any fancy manners. There were no buoys, no dippers. It was, we saw them sailing on the surface and said, "Oh, that boat looks a little funny." And then we got closer and realized it was in fact a submarine. So submarines every so often, but the majority of what we did was flying around, and because we have a radar on our aircraft, we identified ships that might pose a hazard to our ship, and we'd report that to them so that they can maintain their course and get where they need to go, because they don't always have full freedom of navigation, i.e. they can just steer wherever they want. They'll usually be given some sort of higher order, like, "Hey, we need you in this location by this time. How you get there is your business," but they will have some instruction.
So you identify ships, so you're talking like freighters or like.
Yep, lots of freighters and tankers, cargo ships, and we would just look at what they're hauling, making sure they're not doing anything too suspicious.
Do you ever get to monitor the Strait of Magellan, or is that too far south?
That was too far south, unfortunately, but sounds like a fun place to take a cruise.
So have you? So these places, have you ever been to the Philippines? Have you been to these Magellan places that we talked about?
We did briefly pull into the Philippines, yes. I was in Manila for about a week on my deployment, but the majority of our time was spent further north in the East China Sea.
Just keeping track of what's going on there, because there's always stuff going on there in the East China Sea. So, so you're doing these missions, you're doing whatever you need to do. What have you learned in this? What have you learned with regard to life lessons? Your father was always a big guy at sharing life lessons with all of us that were around him. What have you learned? What have you taken out of this, other than I know how to fly a helicopter, and I know how to tell maintainers that they should maintain because it's the thing they're supposed to do. But there's got to be a deeper thing that you've picked up. I mean, we all pick up deeper things. What have you picked up What have you picked up along the way?
Well, one phrase that definitely jumps out at me was one I learned early on in aviation, but it definitely applies across the board. And it came one day when I was running through checklists. So lots of aviation is running through checklists, step by step, making sure everything gets done. And my instructor, I was fumbling through some things, maybe reaching for the wrong switch or saying the wrong step. He goes, "Hey, just take a breath and remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast." And the meaning behind that phrase was just take your time until you can run things through without being jumbled up, without, stumbling. And then as you go through that slowly, you'll find that you're going through it more smoothly. And then as you go through it smoothly, it'll become faster. So ultimately, you'll find yourself executing a procedure, and it might be, an emergency procedure that has to be memorized, and you just roll through it because you've done it so many times, sitting there, with your note cards in front of the mirror, going through it nice and slow, step by step, and all of a sudden, I'm just rattling off, an EP, for however long it takes for me to recite it. But you can apply that to any time in life. Anything you find yourself doing, there's generally not a rush, and you can figure out how to do it right. And then by doing it right over and over again, you'll find yourself just becoming more proficient and better at it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that we talk about a lot is practice, and repetition makes it go well. And you can't practice it. You can't practice it fast right away. I mean, any of the things that we used to work on, Brock, on the basketball court that we drilled into you guys, we always started them slow. And I tell you, by the end, you guys are really flying. So you've had some good instructors.
Oh yeah, there have been some phenomenal ones along the way, and actually the same guy who taught me that also would always reinforce that he was looking for progress, not perfection. And that really rang a bell with me, particularly early on in the syllabi, when everyone really wanted to, do perfect on every flight. Like they wanted from strap in to landing and getting out, everything wanted to be perfect. And as we know, perfection is unattainable, but you always want to strive for it. And so just finding those moments where you can reflect back and be like, hey, you know what, today wasn't perfect, but I did a better job at this today. That's a little victory, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can take that home and then just the next day go out for another little victory. That was a big one for me as well.
Yeah, little victories create big victories in the end. So just every day, just chip away and do something good. Find one good thing to do a day, and you'll be on to great things in many days from now.
So is there have you learned any negative lessons from any of those instructors or the experiences you've had? You're just like, well, I want to make sure I don't ever do this. You had instructors that showed you, yes, I want to, and I can see that, when you're going to go be an instructor now for the flight school, that you're going to take some of these things that you just mentioned, but there's got to be some things you're like, well, I sure hope I don't ever do that.
Yeah. Some of the old adages, praise in public, critique in private. I've seen that completely swung the opposite way, where I have been, torn apart in front of an entire crowd of people for doing something wrong, or I've seen someone else get, just absolutely reamed for a mistake they made. And I have yet to see a time where that happens where it pays off to do it that way, where it would not have been better to pull that person aside and talk to them about the mistake they made. Because rarely, is public shaming really going to inspire someone. Whereas when you call someone out for doing a great job in front of people, that's awesome, because then everyone else there can go and congratulate them, and it really builds them up and instills that what they did well, and they did a good job at, and they get that affirmation, and it continues to inspire them to do their job. Other ones that I've seen would, I think, just be being present with the people that you work with or are in charge of. I've seen leadership where, well, it's funny because you don't see them. They're not involved. They're not coming out. They don't get to know you. They don't. For example, I once stepped into one of my superior officers' offices after having been deployed, and you would think he would have been keeping tabs on me, but instead he actually blanked on my name and had to be prompted on who I was. And it kind of hurt, because here I was, gone all this time thinking he had my back, and then, I returned and he didn't even remember who I was. So sometimes just having that personal touch, being in tune, is what's important.
So you're a Navy guy.
Yep.
And you live in a Navy world, and that's kind of a piece of the military world. But for those of us who aren't in that, on a regular basis, it's really hard. I know when I talk to Harry, I always ask him the same kinds of questions. He was like, okay, tell me how, like, you have a unit and it reports to a battalion or a squad or a company, what, so I can never keep that stuff straight. But you live this military world all the time. How do you see the military life that you lead with your wife being different from I'll say the standard suburban corporate life that your parents lived when you were growing up? How do you see that as different, and what's good about it, and what might you take away that's maybe not as good?
Ooh, that's a great question. I suppose some of the differences are obvious, where the chain of command is definitely more strict, in the military world than civilian. In the civilian world, sure, you got your boss and maybe you have a supervisor, but the sense of command, I think, is generally a little bit lacking on that side. It's not always, I think, seen as, you might question why your boss is there. Like, oh, how does this person have this, job above me? My supervisor is always giving me the double shift or the late shift or whatever it is. And sure, that may happen in the military a little bit more so, but generally you're getting those leaders and the higher ranking people who are there for a reason. Obviously, it doesn't always pan out, but it's sometimes easier to see a higher ranking person in the military, and it has a little bit more inherent respect than what you may see on the civilian side. And again, not always the case. There's always going to be people who slip through the cracks, but that's one I could think of. Another would just be the routine. I suppose having a 9-to-5 job and being in the military, you might always think of us, waking up at the crack of dawn and working out, and then long day of running around doing drills. But that's not what it is. I've never had a more fluid or dynamic schedule than I have in the military. Because you always just have to be ready for different things. On a day-to-day basis, I could not tell you, if I'm going to be flying or not, because I don't know that weekly schedule, the monthly schedule, because we can only build it out so far, because things are always changing. We don't know what days we're going to be available to fly. We don't know what events are going to be available for training purposes. So it's been tough in that standpoint, because it's hard to plan. During the week, if a friend wants to get together for dinner, I can be like, hey, I'm sorry, but I'll have to let you know the day before. I can't plan that far
Well,
out.
that was a thing that always struck me as a parent of a kid that went to the academy, went to West Point. It stunned me how they could be, a couple weeks away from Christmas break, and we didn't really know when they were going to be available, so we couldn't get flights for him to come home. We didn't know what, and these things were always felt last minute. But what I picked up is that's how it is, because things are always so fluid.
Yeah. And that factors into like vacations too, right? If you wanted to plan a vacation to go see, your mom or your brother or something, you can just dial them up and say, hey, are you free this week? Let's get together in, Texas. Let's get together up in Maryland. Let's go see, have a crab boil. Let's go down to, San Diego. We'll go out and go surfing. I have not been able to plan a vacation in advance, in the past 6 years. Because I never know when I can't just go on vacation. I have to take what's called leave. I have to put in this request to spend my vacation days that I've earned, and even then, that might not get approved. So it's
or if it does get approved, it might get revoked.
Yeah, then it could get canceled, right?
Right.
There's always these hoops that just add just enough of a restriction on your life that you're not always aware of it. But looking back, I'm like, dang, it's been hard. I haven't been on a real vacation in a long time.
Now your wife you met in college.
Yes.
And so she is married now into a Navy family. Does she come from that background, or is this? I'm trying to figure out, is this a thing that she finds difficult, that she finds pretty typical, or is she easygoing and just goes with the flow?
So luckily, I think we're both very high functioning, independent people. So as far as if one of us isn't around, we can definitely still function just fine. We both love to cook. We both know how to keep the house clean. So life goes on if one of us gets busy with something. The challenging part is neither of us came from that background. I didn't come from a military family. She didn't either. So we kind of learned that together. And we just found that the best thing you can do is just, communicate whenever, as often as you can. So when I was deployed, it was daily emails or Facebook messages, or if we were in port, daily phone calls, just to try to bridge that gap that ordinarily you don't have to face.
Yeah. So well, and she's moving with you from San Diego to Florida. So that's a good sign, Brock. You seem to be doing that right. So that's congratulations to you on that one. So you're doing military stuff now. You weren't in a military family, but at some point you decided, hey, I'm going to go to Notre Dame on ROTC, and I'm going to go be Navy guy. When did that? When did that spark hit you? Was that a feeling of like, well, this is the only way to do it, or this is a way to do what I want to do, how I want to make through my life, or is it kind of a serendipitous thing?
So you'll get a kick out of this. It actually was as a direct result of me participating in St. Francis of Assisi Church League basketball.
Oh no, I'm responsible.
So I continued playing that in our church's basketball league well through high school. And my sophomore year, one of the seniors on our team was going to Duke the following year, and he was going on a Navy ROTC scholarship. And I had no idea what the heck that meant, because our coach had been an Air Force guy. He served in the Air Force and told him about the scholarship. And that was the first time I kind of heard the option for, the military route. And about that time in high school, there was a terrible earthquake in Haiti, which subsequently led, silver lining, to a lot of great recruiting posters of people delivering aid and a lot of helicopters. And I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, that looks really cool. So it was a combination of wanting to have a change in the world, and then by luck and circumstance finding a way for that path to become reality. And then that transitioned into Notre Dame, I think, just out of a desire to go to a school where I could continue practicing my faith as well as, be challenged academically, and came through.
All right. So we have a little time left, and Zach has reminded me, of course, that we need to give you the opportunity to ask the Bufnaglers to switch the roles here, and you put on the questioner hat. So what do you got for us?
So we'll start out with a broad stroke of the paintbrush. Where did the inspiration for this come from? We played a lot of basketball. I don't ever remember talking about podcasts. What was the spark for you guys where you were like, hey, we sound good talking together. Why don't we talk together and let other people listen?
Well, I can guarantee you that is not how it went.
It was close.
Well, Zach, Zach and Harry and a friend of theirs, I think, Zach, is this correct? Did 2 episodes of what is the Classic Guy podcast, which is
we talk about stuff.
Yeah, it was quite literally called Guys Who Talk About Stuff, and they talked about stuff, and that didn't go anywhere other than recording some things in the computer room one night. But then Zach kept pushing me. He said, I think we can talk about some things that are a little bit bigger, a little bit more that can resonate with some people, and hopefully give them some broaden their perspective of things that are good and things that are adventurous. So we have worked over the last 6 months or so to narrow this focus of this little discussion down, and hopefully we're providing some inspiration for some folks and some things for them to talk about. So it's pretty much Zach's thing. Zach said we should do the podcast, and I said, "Oh, you figure out how to do it, and I'll do it with you," thinking that, of course, that would never come to fruition. But Zach learned some things in all that schooling he's done. So one of them was how to get these things done. So that's how we got to being where we are, and that's why you're talking to us tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I mean, additionally to add on that, I mean, you mentioned provide some good onto the world, and we both are fairly academic people, but we're also interested in that extra piece of life, that craving piece of reaching for more, and let's have a platform, a podcast to provide that. And we've whittled it around enough to have where we talk about history and adventure and that chase in that way, and we've talked about leadership and a bunch of other things where we can kind of have this holistic approach to betterment of life. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it, but
I like
have fun with it, and that matters.
Yeah. And I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, it is very humbling to know that people are listening and that they appreciate what we're saying. And it's Brock, it's really great to have you on here. This is, we've been able to reconnect with some people that we haven't seen in a while, and we've been able to connect with some new people. So typically Zach asks a question of our guest.
Okay, Brock. So you've talked a lot about the Navy, things you've learned, leadership, a bunch of different all-encompassing things. But one last final question is, what advice can you give to our listeners to help them seek and pursue the good in their life?
I think that one of the biggest things I've picked up, just both being in the military, but more so just as a person, is surrounding yourself with positive people. Coming on the podcast today was a lot of fun, and I think we all are better for it. We had some laughs, we had some good conversation, and I've found myself more and more enjoying the company of people like that. Find people who will make you laugh. Find people who will make you feel better as a person. Zach's often spoke to how great it is for someone just to check in with you, to offer a positive statement or compliment. And you don't really realize how much that'll improve your life if you're just always around people that are generally enriching you and making you a better person. So go out, make sure you're, surrounding yourself with people like that, and make sure you're being that person for others.
I can't argue with that. Rafe, can you?
No, I want to echo that, because that is something that as I've aged, and certainly in the job situation I'm in now, where everything's remote, right? There are people I work with. I haven't physically been in contact with any of the people I work with for well over a year now. And we used to get together pretty much every 6 to 10 weeks. We would, a group of us would be together for one reason or another. And that happened to cease about a year ago. And it is really, really important to stay in contact in a positive way with people. A lot of times we'll get the little text message thing on the computer, and it says, so-and-so has a question for me. And, I've found that it really helps if either at the beginning of the conversation or at the end of the conversation, you stop and take a little time to figure out where they are. A lot of people are really hurting, and a lot of people you work with, a lot of people you see on a regular basis, they are hurting, and it's really it will helpful to them and to you to take the time to see what's going on with them, and to be a little bit of light, a little bit of good for them.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it. So, Brock, again, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so great reconnecting with you, hearing your stories, sharing some laughs, and doing all the good things with you. So, again, thanks to all of our listeners for listening. Go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.